Soft Europeans PvP server. I know exactly what this is about too. Oh my god. How many of my chats start fighting each other and saying, look at these Europeans, they're soft. And then the Europeans go, haha, PvP server. Ha ha ha. This is gonna be a good one.
3 months ago, a study was published unpacking the details of how we were all dying. The researchers collected data over 4 decades from 22 countries to build one of the most comprehensive databases of death ever assembled.
Uh-oh, I see a trend. I see a trend over here. Why is it all spiking right here? Why are all these graphs spiking?
Comprehensive databases of death ever assembled. And what they found was genuinely shocking. Young Americans, and in particular young millennials, were facing something of a mass extinction event, which sounds like hyperbole.
I bet.
But compared to the other high-income countries included in the study, an American between the ages of 25 and 44 was more than 2.5 times as likely to die in a given year. So the obvious question is, why? Well, the bad news is—
you guys need to take care of the American chatters, man. You Euros need to show some sympathy.
—that there was no single identifiable cause. And the other bad news is that the array of issues they did find were a pretty comprehensive list of some of the dumbest systems in our current economy. But if this is sounding a bit depressing, don't worry. The bad news is that according to the researchers, a host of recent changes is probably only going to make this worse.
Here's a question for you as you get ready to head out the door potentially. How much sleep did you get last night?
Because, of course, our health...
Dude, I'm telling you, people didn't used to sleep that bad. It wasn't like that unheard of to like have people saying, oh, I only slept like 6 hours. Now it's like people saying, oh, I'm not sleeping at all. Oh, I had like 3 hours of sleep. And it's like, it becomes a competition with some people, which I personally find really fucking irritating. I start yawning if I only get like 6 hours of sleep and people call me pussies and tell me to drink coffee. How about you fucking say, hey, Alana, you should like sleep more instead of being saying like, Alana, you're being a pussy.
Here is still in many ways tied to our jobs, or it's tied to a marketplace.
It's probably the hardest thing I do all day. So I usually only go up.
Holy, this is me right here.
All day.
Not this one.
So usually
this is me. This is me with my gamer setup and the Big Macs and my feetsies up on the couch. And my headset.
Only
Don't forget that part.
I can't work a 9-to-5 job. Anytime I've ever tried, I started to legitimately lose my mind.
Yeah. Me too, man. Me too.
Summit County in Colorado is an affluent town with America's highest life expectancy. Last time reliable data was collected, they had a life expectancy at birth of almost 87 years. On the other end of the spectrum, Oglala Lakota County in South Dakota had a life expectancy at birth of less than 67 years.
Wow.
That is a gap
That's
of almost
a
exactly
massive
20
gap.
years depending on where you were born in the country. To put that into perspective, that is a bigger gap in life expectancy than the USA collectively and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Literally one of the most impoverished countries on Earth, where healthcare is so lacking that people are still dying of the Black Plague. The common assumption is that the wealthier a group is, the higher their life expectancy will be. But recent generational analysis is now showing that there is another economic factor that might be more important than that. The USA is really rich. And yet, our life expectancy is well below other countries with less than half as much income.
Being gluttonous and having a lot of money for food and being inactive.
On paper, at least. Now, I know what you are probably thinking. It's clearly because we don't have universal healthcare when all of these other countries do, right? Well, it certainly doesn't help. But most millennials dying in hospitals are doing so in emergency departments, which are required by law to provide stabilizing treatment to anybody regardless of their insurance status or their ability to pay.
Yeah.
Sure, you might have crippling debt after you leave, but they will look after anybody. The real problem is that more young people are ending up there in the first place. The good news is that we are not totally alone. We are just at the front of the new trend that is emerging. A different study—
all the English-speaking countries are like, hey man, we're going through it too, man.
Published by the International Journal of Epidemiology found that people born in English-speaking countries after the 1970s were now at a survival disadvantage. So, if you're less than 45 and speak English, I am sorry to be the one to break this to you. But here are 3 statistical
no!
reasons why you probably aren't going to live as long as your parents. The first reason is opportunities and inequality. Now, I know what you were probably thinking. Billionaires may be bad and all, but they didn't pump poor people full of sugar and fat and force them to not exercise for 40 years, right? Well, that's
yeah, but office jobs are extremely popular and that's not helping at all. I'm gonna be real. I think that having an office job as a woman or a man indiscriminately, no matter what the gender or age or whatever, it doesn't matter because you're sitting at your desk for like 8 hours a day with very minimal movement. Even back in the day, if you had a job just working as a clerk or something, or like, I don't know, passing mail in a big factory, you still had to like walk around the building. Now you really don't have to do that.
mostly true. And we will get to the role of personal accountability soon.
True.
But the data is pretty clear. The higher the inequality, the lower the life expectancy. According to the first study, prior to 1985, America actually had a mortality advantage compared to other high-income countries.
Wow. See, look, they were doing coke too back in the 80s. Look at them.
In the study.
And they're still
This meant that there were about
healthier.
100,000
It's
people from a
over.
similar population sample that were dying in countries like Germany, Canada, France, and Australia that wouldn't have died had they lived here in the USA.
Huh.
This was largely because our healthcare was more advanced and we were experimenting with cutting-edge new treatments before these other
It
countries
still
had caught
costs
up.
an arm and a leg,
Care
though.
was still highly dependent on insurance coverage. But strong unions forced most companies to offer this to workers and their families. But then in the 1980s, something changed which caused union pressure to start to wane at the same time that most other high-income countries caught up. After that, deepening inequality just put us further and further behind.
Reagan?
Excess deaths is really just a clinical way of
Reagan also got rid of insane asylums. I'm just saying. I'm not saying that it's everything, but it's something, okay? It's kind of scary to think about.
saying deaths that could have been avoided with reasonable interventions. Some of the most common causes of these types of deaths are what are commonly referred to as diseases of despair: liver disease, overdoses, reckless driving, and
Heart attacks!
overall risky behaviors linked to people who have bleak long-term social and economic prospects. These are all highly prevalent in areas like the Rust Belt that have very few job opportunities and no
Yeah, there's
clear way
nothing
for
to
people
do.
to improve their standard of living. But inequality is
Boredom also too. Like if you live in the middle of bumfuck nowhere and you don't have like a steady job and you don't have like consistent income, and the factory that you worked at or your dad worked at for like 40 years, and you were expecting to get a job at that factory because you had that like incentive to go down the chain of command or whatever, or like going down to work at the job that your dad worked at, and now you have nothing, and now you have to move to the city and get an office job. That's not gonna make you happy. That's stressful too.
been found to work in
It's a
other less
factor.
immediately obvious ways as
Leaving
well.
your family
The
behind
Whitehall
as
studies
well.
were conducted on British civil servants of various ranks in the government.
Mm.
It found overwhelmingly that higher-ranking employees were living longer than people in lower-level jobs. The reason was simply stress. People who were aware
Wow, it's almost like I called it. If you're in a lower level position and you're trying to climb the corporate ladder too nowadays, your loyalty is also not rewarded. Back in the day, like, I've heard this many times, not directly from my parents, but like from parents that are from people my age. They said that back in the day, they used to just sit at a job and stick around for like 10, 20 years and collect benefits and work that job day in and day out and move up the corporate ladder. Now you have to change jobs every 5 years. You probably have to move states. Maybe if you're lucky, you might not have to move states, but you have to still move to a different city or a different town to work in the corporation or in the company. Now it's just like the amplification of the stress is much higher than it used to be. Not that the parents didn't stress or anything, but it's definitely higher than before.
of their lower organizational standings with less control over what
sucks.
they did on a daily basis had far higher levels of stress than more senior employees who didn't have as many people micromanaging them and could do their work when and how they
Oh.
please,
They
as
went the
long as it still
micromanaging
got
angle,
done.
huh?
The observed increases in cortisol levels of the lower-ranking employees led to significantly higher instances of heart disease, resulting in a life expectancy a full 10 years shorter than their bosses.
Wow.
Tragically, a lot of
That's
this
a
difference was
massive
from a
difference.
few people dying quite young. Now, the important thing to remember here is that the elite group in this study were still just people working in jobs as a public servant, and the low-level group had full-time, secure government jobs with benefits. So, if the difference in stress levels between these two groups was enough to knock 10 years off their life expectancy, imagine the difference between an at-will graduate with student loans to pay and someone who doesn't even need to show up to work to get paid. The irony is that, as these pressures are killing young people at increasingly high rates, we are simultaneously raising the alarm that we are running out of young workers. So to fix that problem, we raise pressure on—
That's already happening. You see people in McDonald's and like Taco Bell having hiring signs all the time, but then at the end of the day, people don't want to fucking work there because they know what's gonna happen. They're gonna get worked like dogs.
On young people.
Replaced at
now,
every
unless
turn.
something changes, this is likely to only get worse.
Why would
Millennials
you
are just the first generation this is affecting enough to start getting clearer data on. So it's time to learn how money works to find out how else America got so good at killing young people. This week's video is made possible by Lovable. Lovable is Europe's fastest growing platform that helps you quickly spin up full stack apps by just describing what you need. Whether it's a landing page for your side hustle, a quick dashboard to track the project, or a small tool to automate something tedious, Lovable turns your idea into a working prototype in minutes. I've been using it for those I just need a quick something moments. Stuff that's too small to justify bugging my dev friends, but still worth making. It's fast, simple, and lets me test ideas without slowing anyone else down. And the best part, you stay in control. You can edit, tweak, and expand on what Lovable builds, so it grows alongside your project instead of boxing you in. It's not about replacing teams. It's about giving you a way to tackle those small projects that usually get stuck in backlog limbo, so your ideas don't get lost while you're waiting for resources. Plus, it's surprisingly fun to see your idea take shape in real time. If you've got an idea you want to bring to life without waiting weeks, try Lovable at lovable.dev. There is an anecdote about the life of the millennial generation that goes something like this. In 2005, when they were graduating high school, they were told to go to college or else they would spend their lives flipping burgers. In 2008, when they—
Yes! Oh my god, yes, dude. My parents came from a highly educated background, and they said if I didn't go to college, it's over for me. I'm gonna be a janitor cleaning up shit in a toilet. All the fucking time, man.
Graduated and couldn't find a job, they were ridiculed for thinking they were too good to get a job flipping burgers until they could land a graduate role. In the early 2010s, people called them greedy for wanting $15 an hour for flipping burgers. And today, people are angry that nobody wants to flip burgers anymore. Now, obviously, this is meant as a joke, but it does demonstrate that career uncertainty and the stress that comes with it have been a constant for millennials throughout their careers.
It's gonna be flipping burgers, man.
However,
just you wait.
This is happening everywhere, including all of the other high-income countries included in this study.
Wow.
In fact, a lot of the European job markets have actually been significantly worse than those here in America, with youth unemployment.
Wow, Spain 26.6%. That's crazy. Holy shit. 26%. I think the national average, that's not the youth and everyone else included, is like 9%? Oh gee, I wonder why. Yeah, I don't know.
Employment as high as 20% for years on end. But the difference is in America, this is resulting in higher mortality rates because there is less support for people out of work. Now, I know it might not exactly shock you to learn that these soft Europeans have better welfare systems than ours, but this goes beyond unemployment benefits. Living in America is just really expensive. A result of our high incomes is that regions with actual job opportunities are some of the most expensive places to live in the world. In a lot of these cities, even people with extremely high incomes struggle to make ends meet, which means if they lose their job for whatever reason, they have to find a new one almost immediately or risk serious financial hardship.
There's no, yeah, that's another big factor because of how bad the economy and savings are for a young person. Their parents are usually not well off enough to bail them out, which usually shouldn't happen anyway. But, you know, if you have a good family structure, sometimes you are lucky enough to have parents bail you out when you need help at your worst moments. But we also don't have savings, and savings is a massive issue with young people. Like between like, I want to say like 22 to like 35.
This can create issues where people who do lose their job have to pick between staying in an expensive city where their chances of finding a new job are higher, or moving to a lower cost of living area where they can survive longer, but it might take them longer to start earning an income again. This obviously still happens in other countries as well.
Or it's seasonal too. That's another big factor. I've learned that some like places they have very seasonal jobs. Like I have a friend that lived in Montana and they basically only had like a job during the summer because that's when the resort is open, and they were like a chef or something. And I'm like, so you have to like basically move back to town and like work another job? And they're like, yeah, that's kind of just how it is. Otherwise I'm gonna have to move to a city or something and move out of state. It's very common.
The gradient is not as extreme, and basic support systems ensure that people aren't literally one bad week away from financial ruin at any given time. Another big factor in this is transport. Now again, I know it's probably not exactly shocking to you that America has a bit of a car-centricity problem, but this adds to the mortality problem in a few unexpected ways. The most direct and obvious way is that according to the CDC, America has had the highest crash-related deaths amongst 29 high-income peer countries.
I believe
We also had the highest rates of pedestrian deaths because our streets are more car-focused and we drive much larger cars than the average in places like Europe. But the biggest difference is that we just drove more. Adjusted for total miles driven, the USA wasn't particularly outstanding in the data, but because we drove so much, deaths on our road were more than twice the average. This also doesn't help with the inequality problem. For a lot of young people who are not financially secure enough to own their own home, their car is their biggest financial purchase, and one that a lot of them can't live without because of a lack of reliable public transportation in their area. Car loans are ubiquitous, and one of the biggest stressors on people's finances, which can push them into desperate situations. Cars, inequality,
getting a loan for a car, let alone a house, is just such a pain sometimes. Oh, and if you're a young person, your insurance is also really high, especially if you haven't driven before or anything like that for like an extended period of time. Yeah, insurance rates, premiums go up hella.
The threat of imminent financial ruin are certainly not the only variables contributing to our millennial mortality crisis, but most individual factors can be linked back to these three pretty easily. Self-medication, recklessness, chronic illness, accident, stress.
Americans are over-medicated! You heard it here first! I love my public transport. Yeah, but in Russia, like, the metro and trains in general and, you know, stuff like that, like trams and stuff, they've been around for at least like 100 years. In America, basically lobbying ruined everything. The car lobbyists bullied out the train, what is it called? The train network. And it's just like, it just actually killed any potential room for basically having public transportation at this point. The only ones that I can think of that are really popular is New York City and maybe Boston. Does Boston have a good public transport system? Oh yeah, Chicago maybe, but even then I've heard really not so great things. DC, yeah, DC, like really bigger metropolises, those count, but every other place, they don't really have one.
These exist everywhere. We just do them a little bit bigger and a little bit better. Now, not only are we dying a lot, but an alarming amount of us who are still left alive are statistically suffering from crippling lifelong impairments. So if this video wasn't depressing enough for you, go and watch this one next to find out how America got so disabled. And don't forget to like and subscribe to keep on learning how money works.
Really dense areas? No, because in California, public transport is dog shit. And that's really dense too. So I wouldn't even say it's every dense area. It's just some dense areas. Like, when did they open up the NYC? Subway opening. When did they make it? 1904. When did car lobbying start in America? 1917. So car lobbying started in 1917. So they made the subway in New York in 1904, and around about 10 to 15 years later, that's when car lobbying starts. So you can kind of see, like, it's probably correlative.